Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with another Bible study. Today we are going to be diving back into the book of Second Kings, but if you are unfamiliar with what is going on, I hold some unconventional beliefs and I am holding an unconventional Bible study. I suggest you start at the beginning. It's easier to keep up that way. For everybody who has been following along and those of you who are just joining, we are in Second Kings 11 because we left off in Second Kings 10 with Jehu murdering the king of Israel and the king of Judah. Uh, when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, who was the king of Israel, or the king of Judah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to annihilate all the royal heirs. But Jehosheba, daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the sons of the king who were being murdered. She put him and his nurse in a bedroom to hide him from Athaliah, and he was not killed. And Joash remained hidden with his nurse in the house of the Lord for 6 years, while Athaliah ruled the land. So Ahaziah was part of the ambush that Jehu did with Joram. And he fled to Megiddo where he died, and then they brought his body home to Jerusalem. This is his mother, Athaliah, and she's like, you know what? I'm not going to let any of his brothers rule. I'm going to take charge. And so she decides to kill everybody because that's just how things are done in royalty. And so she does, except for the daughter, one of the daughters takes her nephew and hides him away in a bedroom. Now, how do you manage to hide a person from someone, right? She doesn't have a count of the heirs. Nobody knows that this baby exists. That's a little iffy, whatever. But is it in the same building? Then there is a 0% chance, right? But whatever, miracles happen. Maybe she just managed to hide him away. More than likely, it says stole him away from the sons of the king, so she put him somewheres. It doesn't necessarily mean in the same building, I guess, but she put him and his nurse in a bedroom to hide him, and he was not killed. And so that is how David's line is spared. And then in the 7th year, Jehoiada sent for the commanders of hundreds, the Cariites, and the guards, and had them brought to the house of the Lord. And there he made a covenant with them and put them under oath. He showed them the king's son and commanded them, this is what you are to do. A third of you who come on duty on the Sabbath shall guard the royal palace. A third shall be at the gate of Sur, and a third at the gate behind the guards. You are to take turns guarding the temple. The 2 divisions that would go off duty on the Sabbath are to guard the house of the Lord for the king. You must surround the king with weapons in hand, and anyone who approaches the ranks must be put to death. You must stay close to the king wherever he goes. And so the commanders of hundreds did everything that Jehoiada the priest had ordered. Each of them took his men, those coming on duty on the Sabbath and those going off duty, and came to Jehoiada the priest. And then the priest gave to the commanders of hundreds the spears and shields of King David from the house of the Lord. And the guards stood with weapons in hand, surrounding the king by the altar and the temple, from the south side to the north side of the temple. And then Jehoiada brought out the king's son, put the crown on him, and presented him with the testimony, and proclaimed him king. They anointed him, and the people clapped their hands and declared, "Long live the king." And when Athaliah heard the noise from the guards and the people, she went out to the people of the house of the Lord. And she looked out, and saw the king standing by the pillar, according to the custom. And the officers and trumpeters were beside the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. And then Athaliah tore her clothes and screamed, "Treason, treason." And Jehoiada the priest ordered the commanders of the hundreds in charge of the army, "Bring her out between the ranks and put the sword to anyone who follows her." For the priest had said, She must not be put to death in the house of the Lord. So they seized Athaliah as she reached the horses' entrance to the palace grounds, and there she was put to death. So first off, how does Israel wind up in such a situation that they have a woman king for 6 years, for 7 years really, in the 7th year? So isn't that interesting? Do you remember that? I don't remember that from Sunday school. I don't remember at all hearing about this particular sequence of events. And like, I've read through this and I had those lenses on where I was looking forward to the redemption in the end that made everything that happened all right. Without those lenses, though, this is a military coup, and it's deserved. He is the rightful king. But how did they get to the point where she was able to annihilate all the royal heirs? It's just one of those things. Like, we'll never get a good answer to those things, right? It's just one of those things to remember, because there was a woman king of Israel. I mean, I guess they don't necessarily call her queen, but she's the ruler, like, right? She took him in the bedroom, and yeah, see, it doesn't say that she becomes queen. So they don't want that part known, I guess. Like, but this woman takes charge for 7 years in Israel. And there's no priest that goes out and says no. There's nobody fighting against her throughout of Israel. There's nobody bold. Like, I'm okay with women being in leadership roles. Have zero problems with that whatsoever. But back then they did not. Anywheres in the immediate vicinity. Right, you had to get into Europe and Africa to get into some matriarchal societies. And so you really didn't have this type of a situation being possible. But you did have Jezebel. She was pretty powerful in Samaria, I mean Israel. And this woman takes over Judah. That's interesting. Is she of David's throne, I wonder? Is she of David's line? Is she of the bloodline of David? Is that why it's okay for the rulership to have been disrupted for 7 years? Is that why this is okay? Like, because as much as I disagree with David being faithful to God in any way that is good, the promise was that somebody from David would always be on the throne. Well, there's a gap. And that may not be a big deal for you, right? This is something that is never talked about, though, for a reason. There's a reason you don't hear this. There's a reason this isn't some lesson in a Sunday school plan. Because this is an interruption in the throne of David. Before, like, the major interruption that's coming in a little bit, where there's nobody on the throne of David for a very long time. Other than that, this is like dead smack in the middle of all the history, right? This is dead in the middle of when the line was being upheld, before the kings were gone. But there's a 7-year gap where there was no throne of David, no bloodline of David on the throne. And that's an interesting thing to note. Now, was she a rightful heir? No. But this kid was not anointed until into the 7th year. That's what we're getting told here. He wasn't anointed at birth. He wasn't anointed in the 1st year. Like they did David. Like they anointed him and it was kept secret. I mean, he wasn't the king, but he was anointed the king for many years. And let's not rehash that, but moving on. And she was put to death. They took her out of the temple, though, so that makes everything all right. And then Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people that they would be the Lord's people. And he also made a covenant between the king and the people. And so, All the people of the land went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed the altars and idols to pieces, and they killed Matan, the priest of Baal, in front of the altars. That's awesome. Absolutely, right? You are serving the God of Israel. You're making a covenant to be his people. And Jehoiada the priest posted guards for the house of the Lord, and he took with him the commanders of hundreds, the Kerites, the guards, and all the people of the land. And they brought the king down from the house of the Lord and into the royal palace by the way of the gate of the guards. And then Joash took his seat on the royal throne, and all the people of the land rejoiced. And the city was quiet, because Athaliah had been put to the sword at the royal palace. And Joash was 7 years old when he became the king. So, what we have, once again, is bloodshed, right? That now, again, I do not promote Baal worship in any manner, because that was a very bad road for people to be on. And I do agree with this, but does he tear down the high places? We're going to find out no. Does he set their course back and right? No. No, all that gets done is Baal. But he's 7. You can't put it on him, right? He's not taking he's taking the throne, but he is not making decisions at 7 years old. There is a region, and that region's name is Jehoiada. And Jehoiada makes the covenant between the Lord and the king. Because, of course, what do we need, y'all? Like, how many covenants is this now? How many covenants now have we had? But there was an interruption in the throne. This is no longer the same continuous throne of David. It's not. It's not until now that there is a covenant between the king and the people, that they would be the Lord's people. And again, and so all the people of the land go to Baal and tear it down. They smash the altar and they kill the man. And right or wrong, I'm not going to get into that. I'm not aggressing on people and killing them. Like, I serve God wholeheartedly. If you want to aggress upon me, I'm good on defending. But I'm not aggressing my God towards you. Right? This situation, I'm not going to argue the validity. Baal is a terrible thing, but the alternative is not a whole lot better. And in the 7th year of Jehu, Joash became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 40 years. His mother's name was Zibiah, and she was from Beersheba. And Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, all the days he was instructed by Jehoiada the priest. Nevertheless, the high places were not removed. The people continued sacrificing and burning incense there. And so, once again, just because it's the truth, they did not. This is contradictory. These two paragraphs are contradicting each other. He did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the days he was instructed. If he did not remove the high places, and if people continue sacrificing and burning incense there, that is contradictory. It is not able to be together at the same time. It is like matter and antimatter. It will blow things up. It is not. No. Just no. But it's okay. Repeatedly. For every single person. None of them get rid of the high places, y'all. None of them. And then Joash said to the priests, buckle in, boys, collect all the money brought as sacred gifts into the house of the Lord, the census money, the money from the vows, and the money brought voluntarily into the house of the Lord. Let every priest receive it from his constituency, and let it be used to repair any damage found in the temple. And by the 23rd year of the reign of Joash, however, the priest had not yet repaired the damage to the temple. And so King Joash called Jehoiada and the other priests and said, "Why have you not repaired the damage to the temples? Now, therefore, take no more money from your constituency, but handed over for the repair of the temple. And so the priests agreed that they would not receive money from the people and that they would not repair the temple themselves. Now, it doesn't tell us when it starts, right? But I'm going to assume it's a while because it says by the 23rd year. So I doubt that he was 7 when he started it, but by his 23rd year, it had been long enough that he's like, what's going on with these priests? They're taking this money and they're not doing what they're supposed to with it. And so he devises this whole thing to where they can make the priest, all of a sudden the money's accounted for. It's amazing. But you know what's happening right here? This spot right here in history, right? In our accepted orthodoxy history, this spot right here is the part that pisses Jesus off. This is the part that he runs them out of the out for. Right here. This collection of this money for the temple services. Now, it is supposed to be, indeed, for repairing the temple. But it becomes from this point forward where they start selling the exchange of the sacrifice for gold, and where the house of the Lord becomes the temple for money changers. It's right here, right now. We're witnessing this in semi-real time. I mean, it's been 3,000 years, but semi-real time. Right here, right now, Jesus is getting pissed off. If you believe that he was divine, right now, right here. This part right here pisses him off. But he walks in all the ways of the Lord all of his life. That's amazing. And so the priests agreed that they would not receive money from the people and they would not repair the temple themselves. And then Jehoiada, the priest, took a chest and bored a hole in his lid and set it beside the altar on the right side as one enters the house of the Lord. And there the priest who guarded the threshold put all the money brought into the house of the Lord. Whenever they saw that there was a large amount of money in the chest, the royal scribe and the high priest would go up and count the money brought into the house of the Lord and tie it up in bags. And then they would put the counted money into the hands of those who supervised the work on the house of the Lord, and they who in turn would pay those doing the work, the carpenters, the builders, the masons, and the stone cutters. And they also purchased timber and dressed stone to repair the damage to the house of the Lord, and they paid the other expenses of the temple repairs. So wait, are you telling me the entire priesthood was corrupted? They had these funds available already. These were already the things being tied up. Amazing. And whenever the money brought into the house of the Lord was not used from However, the money brought into the house of the Lord was not used for making silver basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, trumpets, or any articles of gold or silver for the house of the Lord. Instead, it was paid to those doing the work, and with it they repaired the house of the Lord. No accounting was required from the men who received the money to pay the workmen, because they acted with integrity. The money from the guilt offerings and sin offerings was not brought into the house of the Lord. It belonged to the priest. At that time, Hazael, king of Aram, marched up and fought against Gath and captured it. And then he decided to attack Jerusalem. So, King Joash of Judah took all the sacred objects dedicated by his fathers, Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, and Ahaziah, the kings of Judah, along with his own consecrated items, and all the gold found in the treasuries of the house of the Lord and the royal palace. And he sent them to Hazael, king of Aram. So Hazael withdrew from Jerusalem. And as for the rest of the acts of Joash, along with all his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And the servants of Joash rose up and formed a conspiracy and killed him at Beth Milio, on the road down to Silla. his servants Jozabad, son of Shemeith, and Jehozabad, son of Shomer, struck him down, and he died. And they buried him with his fathers in the city of David. And his son Amaziah reigned in his place. Now, I didn't pull up the map, and I probably should have, but Hazael is in the extreme northeast, right? He is around the Euphrates River. You have the kingdom of Israel. Then you have Judah down here. Gaza, which is where Gath is in the Gaza Strip, is all the way on the coast, on the west side and the south. And so Hazael has gone through the entirety of Israel, like the once unified kingdom, and has at will done what he wanted. He went down and took over, like the giants I think are dead by now, but the cities of giants, the bloodlines of the giants, he went down to their cities and captured that city. And then he's like, you know what, I'm going to go take Jerusalem. And the line of David, the preserved king who in his new covenant has dedicated this money. He has gotten rid of the corrupted priests and is using the money for the temple, except for the money that the priests get automatically. And now he gives it all away. Like, he's not bold in the slightest. Hazael comes up, and I don't blame him. This dude has just conquered through the entire land. He walked through your kingdom to go conquer somebody else. He walked through your kingdom and your kingdom's ally to go conquer somebody else. And then came to you, and you gave him all your stuff. That is an awesome representative right there. And then his servants rose up and formed a conspiracy and killed him. Like, they don't record none of his accomplishments, right? We don't get to see him anyway. As for the rest of the acts of Joash and his accomplishments, they're written in the book, but his servants rose up and killed him. They made sure to record that in the book. And so his son Amaziah reigns in his place. And in the 23rd year of the reign of Joash, son of Ahaziah, over Judah, Jehoahaz, son of Jehum, becomes king of Israel. And he reigned in Samaria for 17 years, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and followed the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. And he did not turn away from them, so the anger of the Lord burned against Israel. And he delivered them continually into the hands of Hazael, king of Aram, and his son Ben-Hadad. Then Jehoash sought the favor of the Lord, and the Lord listened to him because he saw the oppression that the king of Aram had inflicted on Israel. And so the Lord gave Israel a deliverer, and they escaped the power of the Arameans, and then the people of Israel lived in their own homes as they had before. A deliverer. Now, we haven't got into the Chronicles, but it may be buried in there, right? There's no cross-reference here, because I'm going to assume that it's not there, because the Chronicles doesn't really chronicle the same things that you would expect by the continued reference to the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel and the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah. But the Lord gave Israel a deliverer, and they escaped the power of the Arameans. And then the people of Israel lived in their own homes. So it was not Jehoahaz, the king, who is the deliverer. I wonder, just possibly, if this deliverer was related to some of the people that got summoned through caves and came in fire. If this deliverer was a commander of the Lord's army, or if this deliverer was someone who was telling you, no, don't go down this path. I wonder if this deliverer was one of these entities. It could be a man, right? It could be a David. Why is it not recorded? Nevertheless, they did not turn away from the sins of the house of Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit, but they continued to walk in them. The Asherah pole even remained standing in Samaria. So I'm going to assume it's a human and not one of the entities, because the entity would have been pissed off. Right? Right. Right. Like the entity would surely be mad if they were still worshiping in the high places. Right? Right? And Jehoahaz had no army left except 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers, because the king of Aram had destroyed them and made them like dust at threshing. And as for the rest of the acts of Jehoahaz, along with all his accomplishments and his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jehoahaz rested with his fathers and was buried in Samaria. And his son Jehoash reigned in his place. In the 37th year of the reign of Joash over Judah, Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, became king of Israel in Samaria. And he reigned 16 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not turn away from all the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. But he walked in them. As for the rest of the acts of Jehoash, along with all his accomplishments and his might, including his war against Amaziah, king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And then Jehoash rested with his fathers, and Jeroboam succeeded him on the throne. Jehoash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. Now, up until this point, Israel has not been actively hostile towards Judah, right? They have been somewhat hostile, but not necessarily like overly hostile until now. Now they're fighting again. And when Elisha had fallen sick with the illness from which he would die, Jehoash, king of Israel, came down to him and wept over him, saying, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. And Elisha told him, take a bow and some arrows. So Jehoash took a bow and some arrows. And then Elisha said to the king of Israel, put your hand on the bow. So the king put his hand on the bow, and Elisha put his hands on the king's hands. Open the east window, said Elisha. You might not have done that before you put your hands on the bow. Open the east window. So he opened it, and Elisha said, shoot. And so he shot. And Elisha declared, this is the Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Aram. For you shall strike the Arameans in Aphek, until you have put an end to them. And then Elisha said, take the arrows. And so he took them, and Elisha said to the king of Israel, strike the ground. So he struck the ground 3 times and stopped. But the man of God was angry with him and said, you should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have struck down Aram until you put an end to it. But now you will strike down Aram only 3 times. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You're really going to have a contradiction in the same sentence, right? He didn't tell him strike the ground until you're tired. He didn't tell him how many times. But 3 is a fairly significant number. 3 and 7 are fairly significant numbers. But he had already proclaimed, in the name of God, you shall strike until they put an end to them. And then he says, but the man of God was angry. You should have struck it 5 or 6 times. But now you will only strike him down 3 times. So you are making excuses for God's failure before the mission even begins. That's what that is. That is excusing the fact that it was not putting an end to it, despite what you had proclaimed. This is some narcissistic gaslighting situation right here. This is, what are you even talking about? That ain't what I said. I said if you struck the ground until you were tired. I said if you struck the ground 5 or 6 times, not 3 times. You told him strike the ground. All he had to do was hit it once. He did it 3 times. That's an act of faith. But instead of being blessed for that, he is blamed for the prophet misquoting God. That's what happened right there. And then Elisha died and was buried. Good. Now, the Moabite raiders used to come into the land every spring. Once, as the Israelites were burying the man, suddenly they saw a band of raiders, so they threw the man's body into Elisha's tomb. And as soon as his body touched the bones of Elisha, the man was revived and stood up on his feet. Now, I'm not going to say that that isn't possible. I'm going to, like I told you before, life is energy. Your soul is energy. Being returned is an energetic process. I believe it is possible. It is even possible that they accidentally threw this man's body into this tomb and he accidentally touched these bones and he came back to life. But if that had happened, if that was a real thing that had happened, the line outside of that cave would be forever. Everybody with half a thought that maybe we would bring somebody back to life would be at that cave. And there would be somebody charging admittance. Somebody would have that cave scoped out and ready to go for everybody to come on a pilgrimage. Because that is how religion works. And if this had actually happened, if they had actually gotten scared because they saw this band of Moabian raiders, that they threw the body into the tomb and his body comes to life, there is a 0% chance that they do not know where that is. And there is a 0% chance that they would not take advantage of that. That is an economic opportunity for the dumbest of the dumb. And so, I don't put the miracle beyond God. I believe it is possible. I don't believe, however, that everybody who was about to die wouldn't be at that cave. And everybody who had just died would be carried by their loved one to that cave. Everybody within marching distance at least, and it's obviously within marching distance. It's obviously close enough for the dead to come back to life. And then Hazael, king of Aram, oppressed Israel throughout the reign of Jehoahaz. But the Lord was gracious to Israel and had compassion on them, and he turned towards them because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And to this day, the Lord has been unwilling to destroy them or cast them from his presence. And when Hazael, king of Aram, died, his son Ben-Hadad reigned in his place. Then Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, took back from Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, the cities that Hazael had taken in battle from his father Jehoahaz. Jehoash defeated Ben-Hadad 3 times, and so recovered the cities of Israel. What do you mean? You mean they were in rebellion? They wanted to self-determine for themselves again? That's impossible. In the 2nd year of the reign of Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, over Israel, Amaziah, son of Jehoash, became king of Judah. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 29 years. His mother's name was Jehoaddan, and she was from Jerusalem. And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but not as his father David had done. He did everything as his father Joash had done. Nevertheless, the high places were not taken away, and the people continued sacrificing and burning incense on the high places. And again, we have a contradiction. He cannot be doing what is right in the eyes of the Lord and allowing the high places and people to continue sacrificing and burning incense. That those two are not compatible. And as soon as the kingdom was firmly in his grasp, Amaziah executed the servants who had murdered his father the king. Yet he did not put the sons of the murderers to death, but acted according to what is written in the book of the law of Moses. Well, finally, where the Lord commanded, fathers must not be put to death for their children, and children must not be put to death for their fathers. Each is to die for their own sin. Finally. I mean, it wasn't God keeping the covenant, but at least somebody did. And Amaziah struck down 10,000 Edomites in the valley of Salt. He took Selah in battle and called it Jothkeel, which is its name to this very day. Then Amaziah sent messengers to the king of Israel, Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu. Come, let us meet face to face. But Jehoash, king of Israel, replied to Amaziah, king of Judah. A thistle in Lebanon sent a message to a cedar in Lebanon, saying, Give your daughter to my son in marriage. And then a wild beast in Lebanon came along and trampled the thistle. You have indeed defeated Edom, and your heart has become proud. Glory in that and stay home. Why should you stir up trouble so that you fall, you and Judah with you? But Amaziah would not listen, and Jehoash, king of Israel, advanced. And he and King Amaziah of Judah faced each other at Beth Shemesh in Judah. And Judah was routed before Israel, and every man fled to his home. There, at Beth Shemesh, Jehoash, king of Israel, captured Amaziah, king of Judah, the son of Joash, the son of Ahaziah. And then Jehoash went to Jerusalem and broke down the wall of Jerusalem, from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate, a section of 400 cubits. He took all the gold and silver and all the articles found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace, as well as some hostages. And then he returned to Samaria. So, Israel raids Judah and destroys it. Now, I'm going to assume that this was a challenge to battle, right? Come, let us meet face to face. I'm guessing that is in battle. And so, he tells him, don't do that. But Amaziah would not listen. And so, Israel comes down and kicks his ass. Sends him running. Goes to Jerusalem, tears down the walls, and loots the place. And as well as some hostages, and then he returns to Samaria. Why? Why wouldn't you just take back the entire land of Israel? Oh, the covenant, that's right. And as for the rest of the acts of Jehoash, along with his accomplishments, his might, and how he waged war against Amaziah, king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? And Jehoash rested with his fathers and was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. And his son Jeroboam reigned in his place. Amaziah, king of Joash, king of Judah, son of Joash, king of Judah, lived for 15 years after the death of Joash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel. As for the rest of the acts of Amaziah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? And conspirators plotted against Amaziah in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish. But men were sent after him to Lachish, and they killed him there, and they carried him back on horses and buried him in Jerusalem with his fathers, in the city of David. And then all the people of Judah took Azariah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in place of his father Amaziah. Azariah was the one who rebuilt Elath and restored it to Judah after King Amaziah rested with his fathers. In the 15th year of the reign of Amaziah, son of Joash, over Judah, Jeroboam, son of Jehoash, became king of Israel and reigned in Samaria for 41 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not turn away from all the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, caused Israel to commit. This Jeroboam restored the boundary of Israel from Lebo Hamath to the sea of Arabah, according to the word that the Lord, the God of Israel, had spoken through his servant Jonah, son of Amittai, the prophet from Gath-hepher. For the Lord saw that the affliction of the Israelites, both slave and free, was very bitter. There was no one to help Israel. And since the Lord had said that he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, son of Jehoash. So Jeroboam restores the boundary from Lebo Hamath to the Sea of Arabah. So that's a good chunk. We're not going to pull up the geography. I probably should have, but and the Lord saw the affliction of the Israelites, both slave and free, and was bitter. And since the Lord had said he would not blot out the name of Israel, he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, son of Jehoash. And as for the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, along with his accomplishments and might, and how he waged war and recovered both Damascus and Hamath for Israel from Judah. Damascus and Hamath from Judah. Are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jeroboam rested with his fathers, the king of Israel, and his son Zechariah reigned in his place. And that is where we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I know that I hold some unconventional beliefs and that those beliefs tend to step on some toes. I'm really ready to wrap up the Kings. We are going to skip the books of poetry. We're not going to get into all the Psalms and Proverbs here and now and all of that. And we're going to go directly into the prophets on the backside of these histories. So I'm ready to wrap this up. I'm tired of all the bloodshed. I'm tired of all the conquest. I'm tired of all the deception. I'm tired of all the not holding to the covenant. I'm tired of all the things, right? It all is not good. Most of it is terrible, but the best of it is not good. And so I'm just ready to be done with it. I'm ready to get through this, so I'm not going to spend as much time talking about the things and hammering the nails as hard, especially as we start getting into Chronicles, because it's a lot of just recording bloodlines and things like that. The points that I point out, I have to point out as we go along, just because it is important to note them. Like, most people are not going to watch the entirety of these. Most people will never see this particular one. But it is important that I note that the money changing is a thing right here. And it's enriching the government and the church at the same time. And the sin payments and the exchange are not exactly falling in line exactly with what Jesus was mad about. And I know somebody has already flamed me in the comments for that, and they will never see the wrap up where I talk about things like this, but it is the beginnings of that, right? That this is a source of income as opposed to the place of worship. And that is what Jesus was mad about, right? The fact that you need a penalty to be forgiven is a human thing. That's not a God thing. That there needs to be a sacrifice for you to be relieved of your sins is a human fallacy. That is humans thinking that they have to pay a price. But The only price that was ever paid for forgiveness from sin was your sin. You have to give up the thing that you don't need in your life. You need to willingly turn it over to God. You say something like, Dear Heavenly Father, I come to you as a sinner and I ask you to forgive my sins. I freely accept the grace that you freely extend. And that's it. Like that's as simple as it is if you mean it. If you really start changing your life. If you really start allowing him to change your life. You can't do it. Right? It's not possible alone. Like I'm sure it is. Like somebody can willpower through but the forgiveness for sin has nothing to do with your works. Now, your commandment is to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. So if you see your neighbor hungry, treat him like you would you and feed him. If you see your neighbor needs clothing, treat him like you would you and give him some clothes. That is the call, right? That is what you're supposed to do. That is the acts. That is the faith without works is dead. That is that. You are called to be the light of God. From that point forward, from the point you are forgiven forward. That doesn't mean that you get to beat somebody over the head with what their sins are. God does that enough. You think they don't know what they're doing wrong? They do. They don't need you to tell them. God's got that. Show them the love. Show them that it is worth it to come out of the other side. That is our call. That is what we are supposed to do. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you, and you are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. This has been Pitt's Take. Peace.